Even if I could, words would fail me. No way to describe how much you mean to me. And even if I could, it would take my whole lifetime to show you what you meant in my life. If there were any other way, even just another day, I'd find it. Maybe I'd find you. And such a short life, almost lost my mind when it came, and it took you. And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my way, searching for some relief to ease the pain. But Mama, I need you. There's a hole in my heart happiness can't undo, and selfishly I always want you near. 18 years to write this song, to prove I'm moving on. But even if I could, words would fail me. No way to describe how much you mean to me. And even if I could, it would take my whole lifetime to show you what you meant in my life. And when you took your last breath, I only had one regret. I didn't tell you every day I love you. You were the sunshine of my life, even though it shines, it's not as bright without you. And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my way, searching for some relief to ease the pain. But Mama, I need you. There's a hole in my heart happiness can't undo, and selfishly I always want you near. 18 years to write this song, to prove I'm moving on. And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my way, searching for some relief to ease the pain. But Mama, I need you. There's a hole in my heart happiness can't undo, and selfishly I want you near. It took me 18 years to write this song, to prove I'm moving on. But even if I could, words would fail me. No way to describe how much you mean to me. And even if I could, it would take my whole lifetime to show you what you've meant in my life. To show you what you've meant in my life. To show you what you've meant in my life.
All right. What is happening, everybody? Julian David here, product expert at Townsend Labs, coming to you straight from my Cologne-based studio here in Germany. You may see that I'm a little bit shiny. And the reason for that is that we have a heat wave in Europe at the moment, and it's just blazingly hot. So my studio, of course, doesn't have air conditioning because we don't usually have that kind of heat. And so we just have to deal with it. So I'm going to try to stay hydrated right here. I hope you're doing the same. And yeah, welcome to this free webinar. Chris and Eric, by the way, are also watching, and they're standing by in our Bay Area, California headquarters, of course. So yeah, it's great to see already a bunch of people on the stream right now. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Danny, all of you guys coming over, you know, some of those folks that we've been in touch with, some of the folks that I've seen on Instagram, in our users and fans group, of course. Oh, there's Eric chiming in as well. Hey, Eric, what's happening? They're, of course, just starting their day, where over here we're going to wrap things up after this webinar. But you know, we have a lot to cover today, and I'm just super excited about this. You know, the last stream we did was with Jakir King and Drew at UA, and you know, that was a blast. Today it's just going to be me. It's just going to be intimate. You know, you and me, you guys out there, me. Let me know what you guys want to know about. You know, let's have a conversation about this. I'm totally open in terms of like what areas of Sphere and what areas of live recording we're going to be talking about. So, you know, obviously I have a lot of things on my list that I want to bring up and throw out there, but definitely open to your guys' comments and questions and all of that. So, also, of course, if there's anything about the sound, you know, in terms of the balance and all of that, I'm monitoring the stream, so I think I have a pretty good handle on it. But if there's anything that's funky, definitely let me know, you know, and then we'll tweak it from there. So, you guys may have already watched the wonderful video that we started with during the countdown here. A little bit of hiccup here getting the stream started, which is weird when, you know, it always works, of course, but then once you want to go live, it doesn't. So typical kind of situation, but here we are and everything's functioning. And the video that I just played was, of course, our very first Sphere Sessions video from that kind of setting and from that kind of one take, one camera shot kind of series. And I think we did that last year with the wonderful Alana Alexander and her original song Mama, just accompanied by piano, Christian Frenson on piano. And then, of course, there was the most recent one that we shared last week, which was the Nico Gomez video. And you guys may or may not have seen that, but I'm going to be playing a little bit excerpt of that. So, and then the third one of that set was the Best Part video, which actually featured both Alana and Nico, our two singers. So, you know, some of you may have already guessed that these three videos, these three performance videos, all were shot on one single day. It was a long day last year. And the setup, because of that, the setup was somewhat similar, but there were a couple of differences here and there in terms of instrumentation and in terms of the way I had things set up. So I recorded those tracks, I also mixed them, and then, like I said, the Nico Gomez video, Höher, that one was released last week. And Nico also released the song as part of an acoustic EP on all streaming services and all that kind of good stuff. So a really cool project. And yeah, the nice thing is that we used the Sphere L22 for all the lead vocals and for the grand piano. And so it's a good showcase video or a good showcase project to have a closer look at how you can work with the Sphere L22 and generally, what the challenges are when it comes to these kind of live recordings, especially, when it's acoustic music and especially when video is involved. Because, of course, the moment you have video, you also need to make things work for the picture. So there are quite a few considerations and constraints that you have when it comes to that. And, in this case, all of these 3 performance videos that I just mentioned, they were all one-shots, right? So no cuts. And obviously that is quite demanding for the performers. And we were fortunate enough to be working with musicians that, really allowed us to do that. And as we dive into the session, you'll see that, in all of the cases, we only had, I think the most was 6 takes or something like that, right? So, when you have a performance spanning over 5 minutes, assuming that the musicians have their act together, sometimes it's the first take, but you don't really want to do that 10 times. You can't. It's just there's no time when you're doing 3 sessions like that in a day, and you're going to be wearing out your performers. And so the whole goal of this is to be ready to roll and ready to commit to that sound on the first downbeat, of course. And so I'll talk about that a little bit as well. So Lisa Patterson, hey, welcome to the stream. Her question, I'm going to pop that one in here real quick. Love the L22 for tracking vocals and acoustic piano, but always open to learning new tips and tricks. So hopefully, we can all take something away from this webinar. Most likely I'll take something away as well, hopefully, depending on your guys' feedback. And you as well, of course, Lisa. So let's dive in. I think we're going to start by just playing a little bit of that Nico Gomez video, because that's actually the first session that I want to be talking about. And Nico, maybe just to explain that a little bit, Nico is a German singer-songwriter, so the lyrics are in German. And he's a fantastic singer, and this was one of his, if not the most kind of personal song that he's written. And so, this was a very, very kind of intimate setting, a very personal song. And essentially the goal for me was to capture that in its kind of raw and authentic and pure form, and not screw things up, but also, capture the dynamics in a way that, it translates well on a bunch of different systems, the kind of requirements that you always have when, somebody's going to be listening to this kind of performance video on an iPhone speaker over YouTube. But at the same time, also not, change any of the natural dynamics that and the energy that Nico brings to the table. So that was kind of the main challenge with that. And and let's have a quick look at this and a quick listen. By the way, what you're hearing in the video is the mastered version. So the track was mastered because it was also going to be released on all streaming services. And but apart from that, it's the raw mix that we'll be listening to. There was very, very little done in the mastering. Let's dive into that video real quick.
Alles ist leer hier, unendlich weit. Alles ist still hier, ich höre Sterne fallen. Alles ist leicht hier, unter mir nichts. Die Dinge schweben, ich fühl kein Gewicht. Noch etwas höher, alles pulsiert. Meine Angst löst sich und fliegt fort von mir. Nur noch was nur noch ein Stück, nur noch was höher. Ich will nicht zurück. Und mein Leben und mein Name treiben fern am Horizont. Nur noch was höher. Alles ist leer hier, so voll von allem. Es ist, als wär hier eine Welt zerfallen. Durch die Ruinen ein altes Licht, metamorphierend, alles ändert sich. Und mein Leben und mein Name treiben am Horizont. Nur noch was höher. Nur noch was höher, um neu anzukommen. Neu anzukommen.
All right. Yeah. What a beautiful song, isn't it? I understand that some of you or most of you probably won't understand the lyrics, but maybe just to explain that a little bit, it's all about the song is called Höher, so Höher in German, and so the part where we just ended is basically that little C section where it really breaks down just into the piano, and then it builds from there into this massive ending. And I definitely would encourage you guys to check out the full performance. It's on our website, of course, but it's also, I've shared the streaming link as well, and it's a fantastic performance, and you can tell how dynamic that is. And and so for this recording, by the way, you're looking at my mix session here right now in Pro Tools, and so for this recording we used a total of 4 Sphere L22 mics. So there was one on the main vocal, then there was one on Alana's backing vocal, which really only comes into play in that little spherical kind of part in the beginning, and then in the outro as a harmony. And then we had a pair of Sphere L22s on the grand piano. Let me pull up a picture here so you guys can see that. Let's see. Oh, by the way, for those of you guys who are wondering, because we've gotten comments on my voice in these live streams. What you're hearing right now is, of course, also an L22, which is right up there. In my main shot, you can't see it, but in the picture-in-picture, you can. I figured you guys might be interested in that. So that's actually the 416 model that you're hearing. Anyway, so let's go over to preview. There we go. So this is the main setup of the 3 musicians. I mean, you kind of could tell in the video, but just to be, have a still shot of that so we can dive into it. So there's Alana in the middle, and then there's Nico, of course, on the right side with the vocal mic, and then the pair of L22s for the grand piano. And let me pull up another one here that illustrates the piano setup a little better. There we go. So that's the piano miking setup. So the mics were maybe like a foot and a half apart, I would say. So not like super wide, but pretty close to the piano, inside the lid. And, with these kind of live recording situations, obviously bleed is always a major, major consideration. And, in most of these situations, there's just no way that you can have no bleed. It's not going to happen. But there are two things that you need to do. One of the things is you need to get that bleed, the amount of crosstalk, to a manageable level. And then the other consideration is if you're going to have, reasonable amounts of bleed, then that bleed needs to mix well with the main sound. The real issues start to come into play when, when you have bleed, when either one of the mics is moving, that's going to be an issue. But let's assume that they're all static. Then that bleed, whatever bleed you have, it needs to come together in a way that is pleasing and that adds to the sound and doesn't cause any kind of weird phasing or comb filtering or that kind of thing. So let me see if I have another good example here of the piano setup. Yeah, that's a good shot. So here's another angle of the piano mics on that recording. And we're going to be looking at the Pro Tools session here in just a moment, and I'm going to be isolating some tracks, and then we'll see what kind of level of bleed I got in that one. Let's have a quick look here at some of the comments. So let's see. I'm going to switch back to Pro Tools here for a minute. There we go. And I would love so this is coming in from Forrest Baldwin. I would love to see some figure of 8 and mid-side use scenarios. I don't think I have anything in terms of mid-side, but yes, we will be looking at figure of 8 because as I mentioned, I think in the announcement and all of that, working with polar patterns is actually one of the key aspects to live recording and managing bleed. So we'll definitely be looking at that. And then Ben, hey, good to see you as well. It's great to see some of you guys come back to these streams. It's awesome. I would be interested in the off-axis correction. I've read about it in the manual and the blog. Still don't get it completely, to be honest. That's fine. No worries. It is one of the more advanced features, and yes, we'll definitely be talking about that as well. Maybe just to touch on the recording setup here real quick, just so that's clear. So this track right here that is highlighted is the main vocal mic, the L22. And then we have two stereo tracks right here, these two. Those are the two piano tracks. So for those of you who maybe are new to Sphere, I don't think there's going to be many, but maybe some. Sphere is always, unless you're committing to the sound on the way in, if you want to be able to use all the post-processing and change the mic models and all of that, you're always recording to two channels. And in fact, when you look at the vocal mic here, this is what a typical vocal signal would look like recorded with Sphere, where there's a lot of level on the left or first channel, and then not a whole lot of level on the rear side, which is on the right side of the stereo track, simply because the artist or the talent is typically going to be pretty close to the mic. And so there's a lot more level on the front compared to the back. But, this is a live recording and there is bleed. And so, as you scroll through here, you can tell that there is stuff happening on the rear side, and even more so here on these two piano tracks. It doesn't quite look like a studio recording, of course. Any case, so the vocal mic went through a pair of API 512s, and just to as a starting point, I did not track this with Apollos because we were working at a studio that just didn't have a Universal Audio Apollo setup, which is fine. And I thought this would be a good use case to actually show, an application of using the Sphere microphones with continuous gain preamps and not using it on an Apollo, but with a native system. So we actually recorded this whole session at 96K. This is a 48K version of it, just to reduce the load on my setup here a little bit. But whenever I can and whenever the track count is manageable, I really like to record at 96K, especially when it comes to acoustic music like this. So what was the full vocal chain? Let's look at that. So, it was the Sphere L22 going through a pair of API 512s, and then straight into Pro Tools. And then in Pro Tools, of course, my first insert is the Sphere plugin. And generally, with these kind of live recordings, I end up using dual mode and off-axis correction quite a bit. So you'll see, for those of you who are new to Sphere, instead of using the typical single view, which only gives you access to kind of the most basic parameters that you need to get a great sound quickly, I typically end up in dual mode, mostly because I have access to off-axis correction. And so you can see here that I chose the Soyuz LD0117T, and which is a fantastic sounding model of the Soyuz 17 tube mic that was commissioned by them. And I had already used this on a different session. I'm not 100% sure if I was monitoring this at the time, but actually, in terms of, I'll talk about monitoring in just a moment. But this is what I had on the plugin. And then, I used off-axis correction. I kind of enable it as a default because I already know that in terms of, what the off-axis sound, what kind of character it has, it's going to sound most natural when I have off-axis correction engaged. So maybe just as a quick explanation what off-axis correction does, number one, and I'm going to just switch to my camera view here real quick. Number one, off-axis correction gives you more ideal polar patterns. So all microphones, and especially large diaphragm condenser microphones, have polar patterns that will vary depending on the frequency. So, we always see these beautiful, you can see it in Pro Tools in the plugin. We always see these beautiful cardioid patterns in the spec sheets from manufacturers. But the truth is that, the real world is never as ideal as this. So some of the manufacturers, they will publish polar pattern plots at different frequencies. But even then, you might see 1K and then 10K and maybe 200 hertz or something like that. But when you look at those in a little bit more detail, you can see that especially large diaphragm condenser microphones, they tend to become more directional at high frequencies, and then more omnidirectional at low frequencies. And so with Sphere, because we have the dual channel approach, what we can actually do is we can give you more ideal polar patterns that are less dependent on frequency. So that sounds pretty technical, and it is. But what that means is, when you get when you have, let's say, a vocal, and you have piano, like in this case, piano bleeding into it, because that microphone becomes more omnidirectional at low frequencies, it means that whatever the microphone is picking up from the piano is going to be bass heavy, because at low frequencies, that microphone becomes more omnidirectional. And so, in a situation like this where I have a live recording and I know there's going to be bleed, just as a mode of operation, I turn on off-axis correction. And then there's these two parameters here, on distance and off distance. And I just kind of eyeball it. I mean, in this case, the singer is Nico, he's moving quite a bit, as you could see in the video. But so, he was roughly between a couple of inches, a little under a foot, something like that. And maybe he moved away a little bit, but, not too bad. So, 24 centimeters roughly seemed like a good spot to be. And then here, I have the off distance control. Basically, what you're setting here is you're telling the plugin, anything past that distance, consider that kind of off axis and ambient sound, whereas anything that's on distance is going to be the direct sound. So that's that in a nutshell. And so I set that roughly to where I think it makes sense, and then I start playing around with that and see what pattern gives me the best rejection. There's a couple of questions here regarding the vocal chain. So let's go further with that. There's very little processing here on this mix in general. So there's the Sphere plugin, and then there's a multiband compressor. I really like the FabFilter stuff. Shoutouts to them. And I just wanted to have a little bit of a low boost here just to give him a little bit more body. And then there's probably one of my all-time favorites, which is Soothe, just taking the edge of some of these really loud parts. And then that goes straight into the mix bus. So, there's actually no compression on the lead vocal, no conventional compression. However, there is a parallel bus down here, which has the Neve 33609, and then that goes into the mix bus. On the mix bus, there's just a little bit of compression with a Manley Varimu, and then some limiting to get it up to a decent loudness. But yeah, we did not record into an Apollo interface. We also did not record into a Pro Tools HDX rig. We actually had a native rig with an RME Fireface, I think, or UFX. I'm not 100% sure. That might actually be on the blog on our website. Let me have a quick look here. So this was tracked. Yeah, I don't have that written down, but converters were German company Direct Out. They do great converters. So completely native rig, and a lot of this had to do with the infrastructure in that studio. And I remember now that the way I actually worked with the artists in terms of monitoring, I think Nico didn't have any monitoring, if I remember correctly. He was just no, of course he did, because he had other musicians playing. And so what I did, because I didn't want to have to deal with latency, I just sent Nico the front capsule of the L22 direct from the RME interface. Just the front side. The RME has a great mixer called Total Mix, and you have a lot of routing capabilities, and I could just send him the front capsule, give him a great sound, low or no latency monitoring path. It didn't have the mic models on there, but in the case of the recording, it didn't matter at all. So yeah, that was that. So once again, Sphere L22 into the API 512s, into an external converter, Direct Out, and then into the RME interface into Pro Tools Native, and that's it. And then, like I said, the Sphere plugin as the first insert. Generally, recommend that you do that whenever you're working with the mic, and a little bit of multiband compression. And I'm gonna solo the vocals here, and then let's just check out a louder section. Let's just take this part here. Oh, that's not. This is actually just the piano part. Here.
Es ist, als wär hier eine Weltzerfall. Durch die Ruinen ein altes Licht, metamorphierend, alles ändert sich.
Okay, just realized that the piano was still unmuted. That would have been a little bit too much bleed, so here we go once again. Just the vocals soloed.
Es ist, als wär hier eine Weltzerfall. Durch die Ruinen ein altes Licht, metamorphierend, alles ändert.
Okay, here I'm going to pull the Soothe right next to it. One more time, that same spot.
Es ist, als wär hier eine Weltzerfall. Durch die Ruinen ein altes Licht, metamorphierend, alles ändert sich. Und mein Leben und mein Name treiben am Horizont nur noch was höher.
So yeah, so that's the vocal just going into the mix bus without the parallel compression at this point, and just completely dry. So you can hear there's piano on there, and of course once I start playing with the different polar patterns, you can immediately hear that there's a lot going on there with the polar pattern.
Durch die Ruinen
That's Omni.
ein altes Licht, metamorphierend, alles ändert sich. Durch die Ruinen ein altes Licht,
This is hypercardioid.
metamorphierend, alles ändert sich.
It's interesting. I just actually realized that, so I had this sort of on cardioid, and I just realized that switching it to hypercardioid actually gave me a little bit better rejection, which, maybe I should have mixed it that way. But, this is generally my approach when I work with off-axis correction. I kind of set this roughly in that spot with the on distance and off distance. And, and then once I play back, I play with the different, just kind of pan through the polar patterns, and wherever the rejection is best is the way to go in most cases. So it's an extremely powerful tool. And the other part to off-axis correction here is that I can use polar patterns, for their sound, for their on-axis sound, and not have to worry about the polar pattern that I get. So, and the way it picks up the sound. So, I can show this to you guys on the Alana session that I also have available. I actually ended up, I think, choosing the LD47 model that is based on, the classic U47 tube mic. But I ended up going with the Omni pattern because I really like the sound of that on her vocal. But then there was no way I was going to be able to use an Omni pattern, so I engaged off-axis correction. And at that point, the tonality of your microphone is actually decoupled from the polar pattern. And I was able to dial in a figure-of-8 pattern while keeping the sound of the Omni. So that's pretty, it's pretty advanced stuff, but I'll come to that in just a moment. There's another question here. Once again, when you use an Apollo, do you put the inserts in the UA console or directly in the DAW? It depends. I mean, if you want to monitor through the UA console, and this is what I'm, for example, doing in console right now. You have the Sphere plugin, the UAD2 version of the Sphere plugin in the first insert slot, and let me see if I can share that screen real quick. Here, entire screen. There we go. So, I don't want to talk about UA and console too much because it's kind of only on the fringes here. But I have the Sphere plugin in the first insert slot, and the way I work at the moment, I have it in record mode. It has to do with the way I work with streaming. But whenever you're monitoring, through the console to make use of the low latency monitoring path, then you would put the Sphere plugin into the console, and that way when you have it on record right here, you can print that on a mono track in your DAW. But if you want to preserve all of your post-processing and capabilities, such as changing the mic models, changing polar patterns, and all of that, you would actually switch this to monitor, and then you would monitor through the plugin in your console, but then you would also put it on the stereo track that you're recording in your DAW. We have some other videos on this, specific workflows with console and all that. So I don't want to get too deep into it, but it depends a little bit on how you would like to work. But if you want to keep all the options open, then you would record raw on a stereo track in your DAW, and then put the plugin on it as well there. So also just send me an email at julian@townsendlabs.com, and then I can answer that in more detail. In any case, let's switch back to Pro Tools here into that session. Here we go. So I think we talked about the vocals quite a bit. Let's look at, while we're on the topic of the vocals, one thing I want to point out is, I mentioned that there's no compression on the direct mic of the vocals. No full compression. There's some parallel compression here, and we can have a quick look here at how much that is. Let's see. So this is going to print. By the way, just if you guys want to see, this is the full mix session. And I'm just going to stick to that little section. So I'm going to keep the effects off for the moment, but I'm going to turn on the parallel compression. And then I can just mute and unmute that. I also have the spread out here on my console. So let's listen to the same section here real quick, just the vocals, without the parallel compression for the moment.
Durch die Ruinen ein altes Licht.
And now I'm going to engage the parallel compression.
Metamorphierend, alles ändert sich.
So yeah, it's really not a lot.
Durch die
And here's the
Ruinen
baritone.
ein altes Licht. Metamorphierend.
Again, it's just, touching the needle in some parts. So, it's a dynamic mix for sure. And that's what Nico wanted. So, I wanted to make that happen. The limiting that's on here, again, in a section like this, we're not listening through the limiter at the moment.
Durch die Ruinen ein altes.
I mean, it's hitting it in parts. But it's really not outrageous. So, very, very pure signal path in terms of the mixing. But, one of the things that I had to do to just kind of keep these dynamics in check is quite a bit of automation. So there's not a whole lot of clip gain going on here, as you can see, I think. Yeah, I mean, little bits and pieces here. But then look at the volume automation. So, yeah, quite a bit of work there. And, this goes beyond the vocals. It goes to, piano, and including the reverbs as well. So there's quite a bit of stuff going on. And then, for example, in the end, the whole thing, if you look at the printed file here, at the end, it just gets louder and louder and louder. And I'm actually pulling back on that parallel bus because it was already compressing quite a bit. And I just wanted to pull that back because there's already enough level going into the mix bus. So, in terms of mixing, it was really all about just kind of managing those dynamics. And we can listen to that section here in the end just to see what that does. I'm going to turn effects back on here and just listen to the mix. So yeah, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You can see the parallel compression is actually doing like beyond, 4 dB of gain reduction, maybe like 6 or 7 or something like that. And at some point, I'm just pulling it back to make sure I'm not like, you don't get that squashed impression. And I don't need more level. It's just, for really where the quiet parts are, where I need the gain from the parallel. So yeah, and so that was really it. Nico wanted to have these organic and authentic dynamics that he's doing, but then at the same time he wants it to be big and build over the time and also be enjoyable on headphones and playback on iPhone speakers or something like that. So when it comes to the other instruments, there definitely wasn't as much automation. So let's look at the piano real quick here. Like I said, it was a spaced pair of L22s, roughly this way, this much apart, maybe like I said, like maybe 2 feet, something like that. And when we look at the plugin here, pretty simple, nothing fancy. Using the 414 brass, which is basically the first 414, based on the first 414 that AKG did, with the original brass capsule that was also used in the C12 and in the C12A, and I really like that sound. And again, off-axis correction. This is actually the default, but I felt that works pretty well. And then here I have it set to subcardioid because the thing here is that you kind of have to navigate a little bit the distance that you have to the piano. So I wanted to be close to the piano because I knew that Nico was going to be belting at times, but I don't want to have kind of a pickup that only picks up, that little section of the strings where the mic is pointing at. So just to refresh you guys on the placement. Let's see. Oops, wrong one. Here we go. So this was the piano placement, and we're fairly close, not crazy close. But in terms of, when it comes to natural sounding piano, I tend to prefer being a little bit further back, and maybe having a room mic as well or something like that. But that kind of edge, right, where, the lid closes, that typically, like in a pop and jazz context, is kind of the sweet spot for me. So just outside the lid. As soon as you get into the lid, or under the lid, there's always a risk that you get kind of weird reflections coming in from the lid. And of course, whenever you're, doing solo piano or anything like that, it's always nice to just take the lid off completely, assuming that whoever owns the concert venue or club or whatever is cool with that. But that way you can just reduce those reflections entirely. But in this case, we actually wanted it to be projecting into the room a little bit. I did, by the way, have a room mic on that session, which was a pair of AEA ribbon mics, the N8, and that was kind of interesting because it gave me a bit more of a sense of space there. But yeah, so with piano, really nothing major here. But again, I was using off-axis correction to give me better sounding bleed, essentially. And we can go in here and have a listen to the solo, to the piano in solo. Let's do that real quick. Again, I'm going to keep the parallel on, but I'm going to keep the effects off. That's that little bridge section right there. You can hear Alana. So in terms of bleed, it's actually really quite manageable. And that's the reason why I felt like, okay, I can actually open this up a little bit and make it subcardioid, because I felt like, okay, bleed is fine, and I can open it up a little bit and capture a fuller picture of the piano rather than having it really focused, narrow on just a couple of strings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with this a little bit and turn off-axis correction on and off as I play along, and you guys can get a sense of what that does. and this is kind of where I ended up with. So, not a massive difference in sound, but I do feel like when you turn off-axis correction on and off, when you turn it on, there's a little, it's a little bit of a cleaner sound, a tighter sound. And when you turn it off, maybe there's a little bit more low frequency sort of bloom, but it's not really something that I find pleasing. And so that's kind of where I ended up at. And then, Alana, she only comes into play in a couple of sections here. One is that little breakdown that we just heard. Let's solo her vocal real quick. And by the way, on her, it's just the sphere mic. Actually, in this case, set to the 67. And the reason why I chose the 67 here is because I deliberately wanted her to sound a little bit darker. She's kind of drenched in reverb, and so I didn't want her to be super present. The 67 is actually a really dark sounding 67. And so that was a good choice for that recording or for her part in that song. Let's play that section one more time without anything solo, just the raw mix. So if I switch her to the really bright LD800, she immediately comes forward in the mix a little bit, even though there's so much reverb. And here's the 67. That worked really well for me. And then later on here, she's singing a harmony. Jeff, exactly. The 67 is velvety warm. That's exactly what I wanted. And so, by the way, good to hear from you again. That just felt like a great choice for this application. And I didn't do any processing here. I did have Soothe on there at some point, but you can see it here. It's deactivated, and so didn't end up using it. Because the 67 took care of any harshness there. And then, in the plugin, you can see that I have off-axis correction engaged. I set the parameters roughly to where she was positioned. She was quite a bit further away from the mic. And let's have another look here at the shots of at the still frames. Let's see. So I think there's that one. It's the piano again. And so here, no, that's not it. Hang on, just a minute. There we go. So she's in the middle, positioned between Christian on the keys on the left and then Nico Gomez on the right. And let's see, there was another shot here where I think you can see her positioning even a little bit better. Here it is. This one right here. So, when you look at the positioning, the way I positioned her with respect to the mic and the way I positioned the microphone was because I already knew that a figure of 8 is going to work great in this application. And so, it's no surprise that when I switch to Pro Tools and show you the plugin screen, that's exactly what I'm doing. So here it is with the figure of 8. And the great thing is that I personally have not. I don't think I've ever used a 67 in figure of 8, like in real life, like a real 67, a vintage 67. But the thing with large diaphragm condensers in general is that the figure of 8 patterns are rarely ever the best sounding patterns, because I think that a lot of people would agree that the figure of 8 especially nowadays, is probably the least popular pattern on large diaphragm condensers. And in part, this is because a lot of people today are recording very much up close. And the figure of 8 pattern has the most proximity effect of all mics, or of all the patterns, rather. And so I think a lot of people gravitate to other patterns, mostly because the proximity effect is more manageable. And then Omni, of course, gets used in classical recording quite a bit, but even other acoustic recording, jazz and all of that. So manufacturers, they always have to look at the different trade-offs and maybe strike a compromise. And so a lot of times most of the tweaking goes into the cardioid and the Omni patterns, and then the figure of 8, it just kind of falls off the wayside a little bit. The great thing about off-axis correction, not to diss any mic manufacturers here, by the way, the great thing about off-axis correction is it gives us access to the full spectrum of polar patterns, from Omni all the way to figure of 8, completely continuously. And I don't have to sacrifice the sound quality, because I can get the great sound of the 67 in cardioid, but I can make it work in this recording with a figure of 8 pattern. Eric just commented here on the chat as well that almost all large diaphragm condensers are designed to sound best in cardioid. Yeah, it's exactly it. And so if we go in here, let's have a look. I think it's that spot, right? Actually, in the end where Nico is singing so loud as well, if we turn off off-axis correction here with Alana soloed, I'm going to turn the reverbs on as well. The moment I turn off-axis correction off and you're in the cardioid pattern, even though she's pretty far away from the piano, all that low end kind of comes creeping back in. And so that's, perfect application for a figure of 8 pattern. And, with Sphere, the really, really cool thing is that I can use any polar pattern that that there is, regardless of whether or not the original microphone had that pattern. And, on top of that, I even get a sound that is much more usable and less colored. So, this is something where I feel like, maybe it's not, this is beyond modeling of vintage microphones. This is all about giving you tools to create better recordings and giving you features that basically you can't do with traditional microphones. This is all happening, in the DSP processing in the plugin. What are some of the reverbs you recommend for singing vocals? Let's talk a little bit about the reverbs that I used here, because I felt like they're pretty fun. Essentially, there are three reverbs. That's right, yeah. And I'm going to solo Nico again, maybe in a different section of the song. Let's take this spot right here. So I'm using 3 reverbs. I have a plate, which is the Soundtoys little plate, and great sounding little plate reverb. It doesn't have too many crazy features, but it doesn't need to. It sounds good nonetheless. And but I'm using just an Avid stock delay plugin here for some pre-delay, because unfortunately the Soundtoys little plate doesn't have any pre-delay, and the purpose of pre-delay is to it's basically a delay between the direct sound and then the reverb sound, or what you're feeding into the reverb. And so what that does is that in this case I have it set to 60 milliseconds, no feedback of course, but what that does, it basically separates the direct sound from the reverb a little bit, and what that does psychoacoustically is it keeps the vocal up front, but you still have that beautiful tail. So that's what a pre-delay does, and a lot of reverb plugins have that built in, but the little plate does not. So that's why I added it in front of it. And then there's just a little bit of EQ on the return, just to roll off the low end a little bit. And if I'm not mistaken, that is sort of the main reverb that we're hearing. but let's see. So I'm going to keep it dry to start with, and then I'm going to unmute the plate.
Alles ist leer hier, so voll von allem. Es ist, als wär hier eine Welt zerfallen. Durch die Ruinen ein altes Licht.
Yeah, so I mean, to my ears, really beautiful plate. Of course, there are different plates, really great stuff. On the Alana session, I used the Capitol Chambers, and I think on Best Part as well. But here, I just really enjoyed it. And then there's a little bit of ambience that I created with the Valhalla Vintage Verb. Fantastic sounding reverb plugin overall. Some great choices in there. And definitely something to check out. Whether it's, you mentioned rap vocals here in the chat, definitely. Here I have it just to create a little bit more space around everything. And I think initially I started using it because of the Rhodes and the keyboards in general that are in the track. I just wanted to give them some kind of sense of space. But then I realized that it also sounded really good with all the rest of the vocals and the piano as well. Sorry, the piano's actually not going in there, but the vocals are. So let me mute the plate and just start dry again and unmute the ambience.
Alles ist leer hier, so voll von allem. Es ist, als wär hier eine Welt zerfallen.
Just gonna exaggerate it for a moment.
Ruinen ein altes Licht.
So, I mean, you can push that up, and I was at the location, of course, so I know what the space sounds like, and it's really pretty darn close to that. So it's just a clean sounding ambience program that I really enjoy. It's the medium ambience, and I think I probably tweaked it a little bit. But good starting point for sure. And then, as that song builds and we get to that grand finale, I wanted to add something that's a little bit more unusual sounding, and I got inspired by the keyboards that Christian plays. He had a lot of effects going on those, and so I ended up using the good old Valhalla shimmer, which is, I mean, it's kind of the grandmother of the shimmer of the shimmer plugins. And I think it's one of the best. There are a couple of other options. I think Eventide just came out with one, even though they've been around for a while. But so all of the reverbs, Jeff, are being sent to from the individual tracks here via Sense. So they're on auxes, not using any reverb here on inserts. I do that sometimes, but especially here, where I want to create kind of a cohesive recording with everybody performing in the same space. I'm using Sense to auxes, just so I don't have to, I have the same settings, I have them created once, and I can just send to that and kind of glue it all together rather than keeping it separate. And, at the end of the day, it comes back to the fact that this is not, I may have done it differently if it was just an audio recording, but it's not, right? It has video as well. So when it comes to creating that sound for the video, of course you want to have kind of a cohesive picture that makes sense when you watch it on screen. And you'll note here, for example, I deliberately did not go for a panning that would be, exactly how they were in the room. Because remember that, we had a Steadicam that was moving around, and we were mostly on Nico. So, of course, Nico is in the center of the stereo image. But then, I panned the Rhodes over to the left side, which is where Christian actually was. The Prophet synth that kind of creates that drone, that spacey drone, is wide to give me width in the mix. And then, but Alana, for example, is also panned over to the left side a little bit. And, I could have panned her to the right side to sort of juxtapose her with the Rhodes, but I figured, she's positioned on the left side of Nico, in the frame, and so I wanted to kind of present that way in the mix as well. Otherwise, I think it would have been a little bit weird if the camera moves back, we see all three, and then the vocal is coming from the right side, even though she's sitting on Nico's left. So that's why I went for that panning. But yeah, so the shimmer reverb, and I actually think that I'm pretty sure that the send is automated to that reverb, especially from the vocals. Yeah, quite a bit actually. So the shimmer I'm only using in the end in that grand finale. And let me solo the vocals and also unmute the shimmer so you can hear that, because it does quite a bit, but it really adds to, we did, I think we did 4 mix revisions, and Nico kept coming back to me and be like, make it bigger. And so I did. Yeah, here's that. So it's this beautiful resonant harmonic thing that is easily overdone, but and I would definitely not use it on every mix. And when it comes to rap vocals, it's probably not going to be the first choice. But when it works in a track, it's amazing. So I really dig it. I hope you guys do too. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it on this session, because I do want to talk a little bit about the Alana session, because I did some really interesting things there with positioning and microphone placement, and then again polar patterns. By the way, one thing I want to mention for you guys out there using Pro Tools, what's cool is the way I work with 2 Sphere L22 microphones picking up an instrument like, maybe if you had 2 L22s on drum overheads, 2 L22s on piano, whatever it may be, it would be, obviously it's nice when you can make changes to both plugins at the same time without having to, copy and paste them from one plugin to the next. And unfortunately, this doesn't work in all DAWs yet. Hopefully, there'll be some solutions. I know it works in a couple. And in Pro Tools, it's actually pretty simple, because I can just create a group that's down here at the bottom left. And you see I have a piano group. And if I go to modify that, you can see that the attributes that I'm linking here, there's volume and mute, sure, and sends as well. I'm not using any sends here. But what's key is that I'm also linking controls and bypass of the first insert slot. And so what that allows me to do is just very quickly go, bypass on both plugins, or, change this parameter, and it tracks between both of these plugins. And of course, that's really handy when you have something that was recorded with 2 physical L22 mics. Of course, when you're recording something with a single L22 in our Sphere 180 mode in stereo, that's just a single plugin and you don't have to worry about it. So yeah, but that's just something I wanted to throw out there for all you guys who are working in Pro Tools with more than one Sphere L22. Cool. With that said, I think I'm going to close the session and come back to this main camera here real quick, and close the session and open up the Alana session. Definitely let me know if I've missed anything in the comments. Just ping me again if there's anything that I didn't cover on this previous session. But we're going to be talking more about vocals in particular and how to work with polar patterns here as soon as that session is up. And in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to just refresh our memories a little bit and what that session looked like. And I'm going to play that video one more time, just a little bit of it.
Even if I could, words would fail me. No way to describe how much you mean to me. And even if I could, it would take my whole lifetime to show you what you meant in my life. If there were any other way, even just another day, I'd find it. Maybe I'd find you. And such a short life, almost lost my mind when it came, and it took you. And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my way, searching for some relief to ease the pain. But mama, I need you. There's a hole in my heart happiness can't undo, and selfishly I always want you near. 18 years to write this song, to prove I'm moving on, but even if I could.
All right, I could be listening to this all day, and I know you guys could too, but we want to be talking shop here a little bit. So thanks for those reminders. It's sometimes difficult to keep track of the chat. So a couple of questions that came in. I'm going to mention, well, when it comes to saxophone, we actually have another performance video session on YouTube and on our website, and I'm going to quickly navigate to that for those of you guys who have not seen that yet, because it actually is exactly that. It's a jazz duo with tenor saxophone and grand piano, and let's see, that would be. Oh, Jeff's excited too. Awesome. So let's switch to Chrome here. Okay, so when you go to our website, townsendlabs.com, and for those of you guys who are watching the replay, I'm going to also put that into the little cards up there, so you'll see a pop up right about now. Anyway, so you just go to artist sessions here. And this is actually where we have all the different sessions that we've done so far, those that we've done ourselves, but also the ones that we have featured from other artists. And let's see, it should be somewhere here, right here. So this is called Behind the Session, Halpin and Lee, featuring Matthew Halpin, an Irish tenor saxophone player, fantastic musician. Equally fantastic is Christian Lee, a American piano player. He lives in Brooklyn. He actually has a teaching position at Berkeley. And yeah, check that one out. Dive in deep. We did use the L22 both for the grand piano and for the tenor sax. And in terms of, let's see, this was, yeah, here's the comment. Some techniques, it really depends on the saxophone player, obviously. My recommendation is always don't go too close. If you can, back it up a little bit, because you're going to get more of the full picture of the saxophone. But again, bleed is probably going to be a consideration. In terms of models, I mean, I'm a huge fan of ribbon mics on saxophones in general, horns in general. I mean, for brass instruments, I feel like I will always go for a ribbon first. Saxophones, it can depend a little bit. I mean, I've just a couple of weeks ago I used the 67 on a saxophone, and yeah, that's fantastic too. But the 67s also don't tend to sound overly bright, and it obviously depends on the style of playing. As always, it depends on the instrument. There are saxophone players who like their sound to be very open and breathy. And then there are other saxophone players who don't like that at all because they think it's spitty and harsh and annoying, and who prefer a darker sound. And so, it's always worth checking with the saxophonist in terms of like what their references are, what kind of sound they like, what qualities they like, and then choose a model accordingly. And of course, again, with the Sphere mic, the great thing is you don't have to own all of those mics because they all come with the microphone. And so I think in the case of this project, let's see, it should be here in the notes. Let's see. Interesting because now that I've, given you all this information about ribbon mics, I actually use the OW12 model, which is the number 2 model. It's the darker sounding C12 model, or based on the C12 that we have in the Ocean Way collection. And in this case, I did not go for a ribbon. I actually went for a condenser, and this was probably based on the feedback that I got from Matthew. Yeah, it always varies. But I think the C12, especially in the Ocean Way collection, those two, the LD or OW12s, they're fantastic. But a 77 style microphone, ribbon microphone, is also fantastic. So, and actually on that note, what I should mention is, let's see here, I'm going to switch back here, and put this in the notes, because when you go and download the free native bundle of the Sphere plugin, on our downloads page, there's also a set of pre-recorded sessions that we have available for you. So you can go there and download these tracks for your DAW of choice, and that includes a saxophone sample, and it actually includes a sample from Matthew, not from this particular session, but recorded with the Sphere L22, and you can just go in and try out mic models yourself. And so that's a great starting point. And like I said, I really like the RB 77 models that we have. So that's a great place to start, or the 67 again. So yeah, quite a few options. Let's see. Yeah, Lisa, let's come to your comment here. Question about choice from physical proximity of backup vocalists to the mic. So you're referring to Alana in the previous session. Yes, she was quite a ways away, and this was also true for the one that we just watched, the Mama performance. And it's interesting with singers, because just like other instruments, it very much depends on the singer. And with Alana, she has an amazing voice, and an amazing projection too. So with her, I mean, when I recorded her, I couldn't believe how far she was away from that mic, but that's where she sounded best. And so it absolutely depends on the singer, but it also depends on your space. So I really like to have, backing vocals recorded not up close, not right here, but actually further in the room, because they'll always be positioned further back in the mix as a consequence, because you get some reflections from your space. How far that is very much depends on the singer, and it very much depends on your space. Like in my space here, I will end up something around like 2 to 3 feet away from the mic. Sometimes maybe a little bit closer, but somewhere in that range. And that, I'll get some ambience in there, some reflections, but that's typically a good thing. And there'll be a natural roll off because they're further away from the mic, so you're not catching as much proximity effect. Of course, you can also, for those of you guys who maybe are not as familiar with our controls yet, you can also, of course, also use the proximity control here. And again, this is somewhat like if you're in a space that is not so great, and you can't put your singer 3 feet away from the mic. And again, we're talking background vocals. We're not talking about lead vocals, but background vocals. And you want that effect of somebody being further away from the mic, but you can't do that because of your space, then just use the proximity control and just put that person further back into the mix as if they had been in that space further away. You're not going to get the reflections that you would otherwise get, but you're getting that same sonic character. And so that's something that I would do there. Lisa, hopefully that answers your question on that one. So coming to the Alana session, let's see. Okay, so it's reconciling the natural sounding tonality with the amount of bleed. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And in this case, because of the way she was projecting, I could get away with having her much further back than I otherwise would have. It was I don't think I've ever had an experience like that where I could have a singer so far back in the end. And we were talking about this, like with Mama. So looking at the session, we did a total of 4 takes, and the 4th take was the one that we ended up with, that we committed to. And from the first to the second take, I moved her back like quite a bit, and then we also talked about it a little bit, and I asked her to help me because, again, that song has really strong dynamics, and I felt like I don't want to have to, like, in the end, like, squash the heck out of it, and I also was worried about just dynamic range and not catching peaks and stuff like that, and again, I was tracking with API 512s, so continuous gain preamps, so I didn't really have a way to ride the gain as much as I maybe would have with an Apollo, for instance, where I have a single gain control. So we talked about it a little bit, and I asked her to help me just to manage her dynamics. Well, not manage her dynamics, but manage her distance to the microphone to take care of the dynamics a little bit, and it worked out really well. But it's interesting when you look at that session, the way I had her positioned. And again, I'm gonna switch to preview here real quick to show you some pictures of that session. So let's see. I think it's one of the first ones. Yeah, here. This is a good behind-the-scenes shot too. Okay, so this is our camera operator here with the Steadicam, and you can see her that she's positioned in a way that would look good on camera, of course, but also worked well for me. And she's basically again standing sort of parallel to the piano. So once again, this definitely would call for a figure of 8 pattern. But initially, I didn't plan to have her positioned like that. I actually wanted her to face the piano because, at the end of the day, this is a track that's very personal. It's very dynamic. It has to have a certain energy, and I wanted her to have a good visual with the piano player, with Christian on the piano. And so I had her facing the piano, which then would argue for, or would call for, a cardioid pattern that is, rejecting everything that's behind, rather than a figure of 8. And it turned out that was not so great. And I can play that to you because that was the second take where I was doing that. And so we're going to have a listen to that real quick, just so you get an idea of what difference that makes, those kind of choices in terms of positioning. So here we are in Pro Tools, and I'm going to solo the vocal mic. We can leave the reverbs on, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to talk about the vocal chain some more in just a moment. But so this is the take 2 where I'm going to deactivate Melodyne here, turn off off-axis correction, and actually I'm going to keep off-axis correction turned on, but I'm going to switch it to cardioid. So this is what I initially set out to do. And we're going to solo the vocal mic. Got that. Let's have a listen.
Fill me, no way to describe how much you mean to me. And even if I could, it take my whole lifetime to to show you what you've meant in my life. If there were any other way.
So, yeah, it's not great, right? In terms of piano bleed. I was not happy about that. And yeah, and I talked to her and I was like, well, can we try having you face towards the camera forward, parallel to the piano? Is that going to be an issue with your communication with Christian on the piano? And it turned out it wasn't. And so she, graciously allowed me to do that. And that's what we ended up with in the end. And so now I'm going to switch it to figure of 8 because that's the appropriate polar pattern for that positioning. And we're going to have a listen here.
To describe how much you mean to me. And even if I could,
back one more time.
I'd find it. Maybe I'd find you.
I mean, hopefully that translates because it sure translates here. I mean, that's a massive difference. Definitely give me a shout out if you feel like that's not coming across. But yeah, so, that's the power of polar patterns and of positioning. You can really make your life so much easier with the right positioning and using the right polar patterns here. And again, I have the on and off axis correction settings here roughly to where it made sense for her positioning. And I mentioned this earlier that I was using the omni pattern here. So again, the moment I turn on off axis correction, I'm basically decoupling the tonality of the microphone from its polar pattern. So now, even though I have the mic set to omni here, I can now change the polar pattern within off axis correction and get whatever polar pattern I want, but keep the sonic character of her vocals on the omni pattern of a 47. And what we can do here is, I'm not sure how well this comes across, but let's give it a go. Might as well try. I'm going to switch between omni and cardioid here while keeping off-axis correction engaged. Let's have a listen. So we're starting with omni.
And now I'm all alone, on my own. Couldn't find my way, searching for some relief to ease the pain.
Same spot.
And now I'm all alone, on my own. Couldn't find my way, searching for some relief to ease the pain. But Mama, I need you. There's a hole in my heart happiness can't undo, and selfishly I owe.
So I think the most obvious difference between these two settings is the effect it has on the lower mid-range with the proximity effect. Because even though she's pretty far away, there's still proximity effect happening. And the moment I switch it to omni, there is no proximity effect anymore. And of course, especially when you have a vocalist that, in a situation like this where we've already talked about, okay, manage your distance, work with the distance to give me more balanced dynamics. Well, with proximity effect, the problem is that the moment she takes a step back, she's not only going to sound quieter, she's also going to sound thinner, and which is most likely not desirable. So by doing exactly this, I can have it in omni, get rid of the proximity effect, and then still have the figure of 8 pattern. So yeah, it's really cool. Chris, by the way, Chris Townsend is on the chat. So, if you guys agree with me how awesome this is, give him a clap. But yeah, it's just, it makes life so much easier. So it's really fun. Let's see, what else is there? Were there other questions? No, not really. Great. Then again, with the piano, not that much different than before, but I actually ended up using the LD563 model on this one. Once again, also subcardioid, wide cardioid here, just to give me more pickup of the piano rather than having a really, really narrowly focused kind of sound. So yeah, that's I think a good summary of that one. Other than that, in terms of processing, this is similar but not the same, and this has to do with the fact that Alana had a different vision for this. She also had sent me I think a rough mix of another recording that she'd done, and so I was a little bit trying to match that in terms of sonics. So you can see here, if we switch to the mix view, there is more processing going on here. So there's the sphere mic. Right at the top when I started talking about this, I also got rid of Melodyne, but it really is, there's like there's one note here, or a couple of lines here in one spot. It's extremely minimal. But the truth is that the rejection that I got in the end was so good that I actually could tune a little bit. But it really was just in one section towards the end. So not much there. But then I did use the 47 model. I do have a little bit of de-essing going on. And then, not a whole lot of EQ, but it's dynamic EQ. So just, kind of taming a couple of things that poke out in certain sections. And let's go here and see what each of those does.
And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my way.
I'm just going to deactivate or bypass these for the moment. So this is just coming out of sphere.
And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my way, searching for some relief too.
So then the first in the chain is the de-esser.
And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my way, searching for
really nothing heavy-handed going on here. Once again, this is with acoustic music like this, I find that oftentimes, less is more, and you got to do what you got to do, but it's really not over-processing it, and oftentimes I end up with using multiple stages of compression and processing, so it may seem like a lot going on in that session, but it's actually not, because each element is just doing a little bit. So here's the FabFilter EQ.
And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my way.
Again here, this area, kind of proximity effect, maybe taming a little bit of some sections where she's in a lower register compared to a higher register, just evening that out. And then here comes the CL1B.
And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my way, searching for some relief too.
Sorry about the fact that that's not level matched, but obviously doing quite a bit of gain. But again, not doing a ton of compression, just a little bit. And then our good friend Soothe, this is the earlier version of that one.
And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my way, searching for some.
Doing kind of a combination of de-essing and lower mid-range kind of harshness and that kind of thing, and then I'm rounding it off with tape, soft tube tape.
And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my way, searching for some relief to ease the pain. But mama, I need.
I actually really like the setting for her. It's the B type tape setting because it adds a lovely, it's the tape bump essentially that they're emulating. It adds a really nice kind of lower, just body to it that I really like on this one. And then that goes into the mix bus. I did not use parallel compression on this track, unlike the first example that I had. Not exactly sure why. Maybe that wasn't part of my template at that time. It's been a while, but whenever you have something that sort of develops with a lot of dynamics, I'm actually a pretty big fan of parallel compression. I do have a C2 here. Oh, maybe this is why, because I'm actually in the C2. I have a parallel path here that is actually gives me quite a bit of the unprocessed and then the compressed signal as well.
And now I'm all alone, on my own, couldn't find my...
So, it seems like it's actually doing a lot of compression, but it's not because it's parallel and it's almost at the same, the dry gain is almost at the same level as the parallel. So, again, parallel compression is your friend on acoustic music like this. And then there's a little bit of EQ here with a massive passive and just a little bit of stereo widening. And then that goes into just a little bit of limiting to tame some of those peaks. And that's it. So, once again, like pretty minimal session. And it's all about dynamics and managing that. And I hope that what comes across here is there's not one control that you tweak. It's a combination of things. It's working with the artist, especially with singers, working with the artist in terms of managing their distance to the microphone. And of course, it always helps when you have singers that have the experience and that are at least open to trying that. And that kind of thing gets easier the more the more experience those singers have, because and the more they have this song and this performance locked down, because if they're wondering about pitch and dynamics, lyrics, there's a lot of stuff to have in the back of your head when you're singing, for sure. And then working with your mic distance on top of that, if the singer has no experience with that whatsoever, I completely realize that that's going to be tough. So Lisa, maybe, I know you work with singers a lot, maybe you can chime in what your experience is and how easy it is to work with singers on working with mic distance and all that, because that's a key element to recording to me. When it works out beautifully. So it makes your life easier. You don't have to compress as much, you don't have to de-ess as much, and you don't have to use a multiband or something like that. And then working in different stages. And in this case, I don't think I automated as much. No, I did not. Interesting. So really took care of the dynamics, but you can kind of see it in the waveform compared to Nico's vocals. Nico's vocals were much more dynamic. And I kind of let him roll with that. And he, because he's playing on the piano while he's singing, he also doesn't have the chance to move as much. And so with him, I had to automate a lot more. With Alana, I did not. But then I added a little bit of compression just to keep everything in check. But also for the sound, I knew that the sound I was going for with this one was maybe slightly more processed than Nico's, and so that's what I did. And I hope you guys dig it. So I think that kind of covers most of the things I wanted to talk about. By the way, I know that there are quite a few people here that are already a member in our users and fans group. I just shared the link in the chat, so if you're not a member of our users and fans group, definitely head over there and check that out. It's always great to see folks coming back to these streams. It's always great to see people, chiming in the users and fans group. Danny and Jeff. We really look at this as kind of a sphere family, an active community where we help each other out. And I think this is even more important, in these times. And so, I think we're going to do more of this. I want to cover a couple of more instruments. There have been a lot of people asking about talking about different instruments, talking about some of these advanced features. So hopefully I was able to cover a little bit of that, and we're going to come back with more. I know I haven't talked a lot about dual mode, which is basically, this view of the plugin. I mostly covered off-axis correction here, and haven't talked a lot about mixing different microphones and any of that. And in parts, this is because I didn't need to in these sessions, and it very much depends on the kind of instruments you're recording. But dual mode is great because you can blend together different characteristics of microphones. Most common application would probably be recording electric guitars, where you have multiple, in this case, virtual microphones on one guitar cab, and you're blending those together, and you can make that a dynamic part of your mixing process, and have one sound in the verse and another sound in the chorus and that kind of thing. So there's a lot more here, but I hope that I was able to give you guys a quick look at what you can do with the L22, especially when it comes to polar patterns and positioning, and getting great results in these kind of acoustic performances, live recording situations where you have multiple people in one room, and you're managing bleed and all of that. So that's I think pretty much it. There's Lisa chiming in. It's really cool to see you guys engage here. Their experience, their timbre, their movement versus stillness, and I find especially if they are live stage performers, there's so much habit, like they behave like they're still on an SM58. Yeah, well, hopefully they're not cupping the L22 when they're singing into it. Yeah, for sure. I mean, as a vocal coach, I imagine that can be pretty challenging. And for an engineer and producer like me, it's always great. Like the moment you have a singer and things go well, and you realize that, hey, I can actually work with all of these different parameters, if you will, it just becomes so much more fun and gratifying, because then I just don't have to do as much in terms of processing. And in the end, you have sessions like these where you have a fantastic emotion that comes across, and you have a natural performance, but that just sounds compelling and sounds intimate and sounds personal. And that was our goal with these sessions. And hope you guys enjoyed this. Definitely give me some more comments, share this with whoever you think could be interested in it. And we're going to be back with more. We have some really great stuff coming, especially when it comes to recording, acoustic instruments with the L22, a whole range of instruments. Some great content coming up with Cassidy Turbine. So definitely make sure you subscribe to our channel, hit that bell for your notifications, and join us in the Facebook group. It'll be fun. So without further ado, have a good day. Have a good night here in Germany, whoever's listening, and we'll be back soon. Okay?